I want to talk today about this whole theme of outside the walls and how it impacted my life personally. I'm going to tell you a couple of things that I went through and how my mindset changed, and hopefully it'll encourage you. If you're part of the Harbor family, you've heard some of these stories before, so get over it. We're going to do it again. But I've entitled my message today, Friends in Low Places. I've got friends in low places where that would be a great place to stop, actually, right there. So, but that friends in low places, and we're going to be looking today in Matthew chapter 9. It's actually Matthew's account of how he started following Jesus. I love it. He's kind of writing like he's the third person, but you kind of see the process of how he was called and how he responded. And how Matthew was really an evangelist in a lot of ways, and we're going to look at that in just a minute. So we're going to start in verse 9, and it says, as Jesus left Capernaum, he came upon a tax-collecting station where a Trattorius Jew was busy at his work. I think I just said Trattorius wrong, but that's okay. No, just ignore that. It's early it's not even morning anymore, is it? There's no excuse. Collecting taxes for the Romans. His name was Matthew. Come follow me, Jesus said to him, and immediately Matthew jumped up and began to follow Jesus. Later, Jesus went to Matthew's home to share a meal with him. That's significant. Many other tax collectors and outcasts of society were invited to eat with Jesus and his disciples. And when those known as the Pharisees saw what was happening, they were indignant, and they kept asking Jesus' disciples, why would your master dine with such lowlifes? When Jesus overheard this, he spoke up and said, healthy people don't need to see a doctor, but the sick will go for treatment. Then he added, now you should go and study the meaning of the verse. I want you to show mercy and not just offer me sacrifice. For I have come to invite the outcasts of society and sinners, not those who think they are already on the right path. Man, you know what? If that one sentence, he's come to invite the outcasts and the sinners, most of us wouldn't be here today if Jesus didn't come to do that. Because I don't know about you, but I did not have it all together. And some would argue that I still don't, but in different ways. But there was a time that we all, were living for ourselves and living out there in the world and doing stupid things and making a mess out of life. And then we met Jesus, just like Matthew. We heard the call, we responded to the call, and life has been different ever since. Jesus had friends in low places. I have a feeling that you and I might be surprised at who makes it into heaven. And maybe we're going to be surprised at who's not going to be there. I don't know. But I think that we get so caught up, and especially in our American church culture, with the event, which is our service, the event. And sometimes, like myself, we can lose track of people in the midst of that. Wanting to put on a quote-unquote service and have church on Sunday, which is great. I mean, that's great. We love doing that. But that is not all of it. In fact, it's a very small part of it. In fact, Sundays should be a celebration of what's been going on the entire week. If I have one more person say, I'm going to leave because I'm not getting fed. I just want to go. That's not my responsibility. That's on you. Sorry, not anyone here, but the other people. The temptation is for you and I to surround ourselves with people who think like us, who look like us, who believe like us. That's where you tend to be most comfortable. If you're political, you surround yourself strictly with people who vote the same way you do. And everyone else is going to hell. We might have a little light attendance tonight, Pastor Scott. It's been crazy. In my life, God has been using me to build relationships with some people, and I'm just going to say positions that we are polar opposites politically. And it's so crazy. The ones that we are so polar opposite politically, they are reaching out and saying, texting me and emailing me and calling me and say, will you pray for me, blah, 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 blah. The ones who would agree with me politically don't really have any use for me. And so, we all need to be pulled outside of our comfort zones. Because the reality is that there's a lot of people around you and me that don't believe the way we do, that don't think the way we do. But listen, I believe that it's okay. Listen, one of the things that we believe here at the Harbor is just this, that it's okay to belong before you believe. Because that's really what people are searching for, is somewhere to belong. A relationship that accepts them and loves them regardless of all the other stuff. And I'm here to tell you, I believe that was Jesus' approach to ministry. We get all hung up even in the church world, man. Like, if you're non-charismatic and you're charismatic, you can't have fellowship because you're all jacked up about that. And if you're Calvinist and Arminian, you can't have fellowship. If you're Reformed, it's exhausting. Give it a rest. Let's just turn our eyes upon Jesus and look to his wonderful face, and the things of the earth will grow strangely dim. That was good, wasn't it? I thought of that myself. Jesus set a precedent for ministry because he surrounded himself with people who were nothing like him. Every one of the disciples that he called were nothing like him. None of them were like him. And he used this group of guys that couldn't even get along with each other to not only change the world at that time, but through you and I today are continuing to change the world because of the foundation that we now walk on. I think it's amazing how Matthew tells this story of how he started following Jesus and how quickly he joins Jesus when he gets the call. But what's scandalous about this story is the fact that Jesus even called him at all. Because he was probably one of the most hated men in the Jewish community. He was a tax collector, and tax collectors had bad reputations among the Jews. They were considered traitors because they worked for Rome. And not only that, when they collected your taxes, they would overcharge you and line their pockets with the difference. Now, let me just put that in 21st century English here. The IRS calls you, and the IRS says, okay, I know you owe $25,000, but you need to pay us $28,000 to get everything straight. And you say, well, I only owe you $25,000. No, if you don't pay us $28,000, we're going to freeze everything, and you're going to lose everything. But I only owe you $25,000, but you're going to give us $28,000. And you know full well that dude's going to put that other $3,000 in his pocket. Wouldn't that want to make you go and break someone's legs? But that's modern day. That's exactly, they were crooks. They were people that took advantage of people that were struggling just to pay the bare minimum. They were greedy. They were dishonest. And what was so crazy is that Jesus picks out the chief of them and says, follow me. Scandalous, man. And then we read that Jesus is reclining at the table with his disciples in Matthew's house. And it gets better. Matthew invites his other tax collector friends and outcasts and lowlifes. They're all hanging around the table, laughing, cutting up, joking, having conversation, and the Pharisees' minds are blown. They're just, how can this be? He's associating with those types of people. And it's just, it's just, they can't get their mind around it. Because when you were sitting at a table with someone and eating with them, you were conveying the fact that there's an association there and acceptance. And the religious community just wigged out. Jesus was known as a friend of sinners. And the thing I love about this story is that neither Jesus nor his disciples had any problem with the scenario here. They were just chilling at the table. Wouldn't you love to hear the conversation they were having with those lowlifes? You know, I want to just share with you how my journey of becoming unchurchified started. And I started my early career as a young man as a plumber. And I don't call me if you need plumbing. Every time I do that, I get calls and, will you come and put a water heater in? No. I actually had one lady in my last church call me on Sunday morning, wanted me to come over and fix her toilet. She got mad when I said no and left the church because I had something going on Sunday morning. True story. God's honest truth. And so I started, and I gave my life to Christ while I was still in plumbing, and so I worked in the trades and was accustomed to being on the job site and going out after work and hitting a bar and drinking with the guys. And, you get to know guys in the trades, and that was my life. I come to Christ, and before I know it, guys are coming to me in the basement of a new house and saying, hey, bro, will you pray with me? And my wife just left, or I just got arrested on a DWI, whatever. And so I'm doing this thing called ministry. I didn't even know what it was. And I started to like the feeling of it, like, man, I can actually help people. And that's where God started to drop the seeds into my heart about ministry. And it's crazy. Fast forward a few years, God divinely opens up doors for me to serve at a church. Great church. Experienced a lot of growth. For 10 years, I served in ministry, out of the secular field. And the sad part, and this is on me, the sad part is I was so busy doing ministry, I didn't know my neighbors. I didn't know anyone in the community that didn't go to my church because I was so busy doing ministry inside the walls of that church. But my heart always yearned for the streets. And I got to be honest with you, man. There's a scripture that says, don't be weary in well-doing. Man, I am all over that one. I was miserable. I was like, man, this is it? Planning these events. And I think church events are great. I'm not bashing church events. We need them to encourage one another. Don't email me. I'll just forward it to someone. But what I'm saying is, if that's it, we've missed it. And so I was miserable, and so we were doing some ministry in New Jersey, and God put it on our hearts to sell everything we had and move to New Jersey with 2 small children, 4 and 6 years old. Everything we owned was in the back of a U-Haul truck, heading 800 miles, 700 miles east. And some of you that are older, chronologically gifted like myself, you might remember Stephen Curtis Chapman, The Great Adventure. I played that for 15 stinking hours, man, straight. Because that's what kept me going, because I was wanting to do a U-turn and head back. I was scared to death, didn't know what was ahead, but The Great Adventure, saddle up your horses. We got a trail ablaze, man. See, I want to sing that right now so bad, but we would clear this place out right now. Whoa. I'm going to stop. So we moved to Hackensack, New Jersey, 6 miles from the George Washington Bridge. We're in this little church, starting it out. We had two ladies when we started, and our family. So we like tripled overnight. It was awesome, but there was no money. My wife and I were looking for jobs, and it was like it was crazy how now I think about it. If you came to me and said, I want to do this, I'd probably go, bro, what is wrong with you? But I knew God had spoke to me. And so we ran out of money in about the first 3 months, and it was in January, and man, I was like, I got like $12 in the checking account, and I got a $1,350 rent payment due in like a week and a half, and I still hadn't been able to find work, and I'm like on my knees in my office praying and saying, God, I did this for you. I moved my family. I don't even have enough to buy a bus ticket back home. And I was just having it out with God. And and there was a tough weekend, man. I got up and I didn't turn the TV on the whole weekend. I was so discouraged. I don't even want to know what that Sunday sermon was like because I'm sure it was very depressing. And we get out of church, and that hour and a half or 2 hours we were at church, I come out, there's a foot of snow on my car. I didn't even know it was going to snow. And some of you that were alive back then, right, remember the blizzard of 96. And so I didn't even know. We barely made it home. I got home, and now I'm really depressed because I'm thinking, oh, great, we're broke, we're snowed in. How bad can life get? And so turn on the TV. Now, we moved from Michigan, which most of you think is like Anchorage, Alaska. It's not that bad. And so I turn on the TV, and I see, we were used to like winter storm warnings. That was common. They said, there's a heavy snow warning. And I'm like, what the heck is a heavy snow warning? I've never heard of that before. We got 36 inches of snow in Hackensack in that snowfall. I couldn't even see my car. It was gone. And I'm like depressed. I'm driving my wife crazy. She's trying to cheer me up. You ever just get to that point where you're done, you're shot. You're like Elijah, just kill me right now, God. Take me home. And there's a knock at the door about 10 o'clock at night. And it's my landlord who owned a business next door. And he had told me when we signed the lease, he goes, dude, if you ever need some extra work, we have a snowplow company in the winter, and we could use some guys that are clear sidewalks and plow snow. And I'm thinking in the back of my mind, that's a minimum wage job. Yeah, I will never call you. But I had $12 in the checking account. And my wife is like, for the love of God, get off the couch and go to work. And I'm like, okay. So I go to work. This is 10 o'clock at night after being up all day. 27 hours later, we finished. And so I told the guy, my boss, I said, don't tell anyone I'm a pastor, man. I don't want anyone to know. And of course, word did get around. And so I had to prove something. I had to work harder than the rest of the guys so that they didn't think I was a wuss. And so I was working really, really hard, and I was killing myself. And I was so tired I couldn't even feel my legs anymore. I was just exhausted. But the thing that was crazy is this company, most of the guys that worked for them were ex-cons or in trouble with the law, and so when we would be out on these jobs, we were doing bank parking lots and shopping center parking lots during that storm. And so we would run into a different crew, and these guys would go, Pastor, come here. And they'd pull me aside and go, will you pray for me? My probation officer's mad at me, blah, 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 blah. And so I would say, yeah, man, and I'd just say a quick prayer, and this happened all night long. So we get done, and my attitude was really bad. I'm like, this is great. What a colossal waste of time this has been. And in my mind, I'm like, God, you called me to do ministry. At the end of the 27 hours, these guys are like, yeah, we're going to the Irish pub afterwards. Man, come, we want to talk to you. And I'm like, okay, so I haven't been in a bar since I became a Christian. I had a nasty battle with alcohol. And I'm like, yeah, no, I can't. No, man, come on, you want to do it? And I'm like, I was stuck. So I called my wife, and God had spoke to my wife in prayer about it, and she said, you need to go. And I'm like, really? Fill it up there, partner. So I go into this pub, and I'm looking around like, oh, man, they're going to yank my ministry papers if anyone finds out about this. And I walk into the place, and so I'm in my mind like, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get out of this? And so we walk in, and it wasn't as demonic as what I pictured it. And I walked in, I told the bartender, I goes, make me a pot of coffee and keep my cup full. So I sat at the bar, and it was a square bar. It was pretty big. You could probably get 40 people around this bar. I sat around this bar, and they're all drinking whatever. I'm drinking black coffee. And one of them says, "Tell us your story." I'm like, "My story?" "Yeah." So I start to share my testimony with these guys around the bar. And guys are walking in, and the guy that owns the bar, "Hey, dude, come over here. This is the pastor of New Life Assembly." I'm like, don't. You ruined it, man. What's wrong with you? So there's guys, all the stools were filled up, so there's guys standing behind the stools, holding their beer and whatever, and they're all like listening, and I'm sharing my testimony with them, how I came to Jesus. And there are guys so choked up they can't even talk. I felt the Spirit of God come down into that place like I had never felt before. And yeah. But you know what was crazy? I still couldn't see it yet. I was still fuming over the fact that this was a waste of time. And so the guy that owned the bar goes, "Hey, pastor, if you ever need anything, let me know." And the thought came to me. I said, "Hey, we're having a Friends Day in a couple weeks." And he goes, "Drop off some flyers tomorrow." He let me put Friends Day flyers all around that bar. And when Friends Day came, we had about 15 of those guys that come in. It was like a herd of buffalo. We had metal chairs on a hardwood floor. It was a dance studio. There was not a chair in a straight line after those guys came in. And those of you that know me, that messed me up. Couldn't even preach. Like, dude, can you move? Just get the string line out there, guys. Rows 3 and 4, you're all jacked up. From that time on, every time I was in town and I would see one of those guys, "Hey, pastor," and they'd come over and talk to me. I got to tell you, man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, I am so out of touch with what's going on right at the corner of my street. These are good people that are hurting, that need answers, that are struggling, that have all kinds of hurts. And I moved from being angry to being thankful. Like, God, I can't even believe you would trust me to do that. It was mind-blowing for me. So Matthew, going back to Matthew, the tax collector, I think looking at Matthew as an example, I think you and I need to have more Matthew parties. Don't invite your church friends, not all of them, maybe one or two, but invite your coworkers, invite your family. Invite people that don't agree with you, that are angry, people maybe you don't even like. Maybe those are your church friends. I don't know. I don't know what church you go to. I don't know. All emails go to Pastor Scott Jankowski at the Harbor LI. Luke's account of this dinner sheds a little bit different light on it. Luke says, Matthew wanted to throw a banquet to honor Jesus. So he invited Jesus to his home for dinner, along with many tax collectors and other notable sinners. How many were a notable sinner? I mean, it's not good enough just to be a sinner, but I want to be a notable sinner. I've got friends. No. Matthew, in his mind, simply wanted to invite his closest friends to meet someone that intrigued him. He said, "Come on, man, let's have a meal. We're going to have some brisket and some ribs, and we're going to just chill at the table, and we're going to talk. We're going to get to..." And the disciples, those guys fit right in with that crowd because they were still there, many of them. And I'll bet you that Jesus had a blast that night, connecting with those guys. And he was messing with them. He knows everything. He was messing with them like, "Hey, George, what's up with that, How'd you know that?" It was awesome. This was a low-pressure way for Matthew's friends to meet Jesus and his disciples, and vice versa. I think we should have Matthew parties more often. But the issue is with us, like our love is conditional on the most part. We love those who love us, or we love those who can help us in return. Kind of reminds me of a girl I heard about by the name of Maria. Maria was engaged to be married, And she abruptly called off the engagement and broke up with her fiancé. And then after a few weeks, she had second thoughts. And I want to read to you the letter that she wrote to her ex-fiancé, Tony. She said, "Dear Tony, no words could ever express the great unhappiness I've felt since breaking off our engagement. Please say you'll take me back. No one could ever take your place in my heart, so please forgive me. I love you, I love you, I love you. Yours forever, Maria." P.S. Congratulations on winning the New York Powerball lottery. Jesus was asked one time, it was a trap, but I'm glad he answered it. Yo, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? They were going to trap him. Whatever he said, they were going to get him. And Jesus probably didn't even have to think about it. He goes, I'll tell you what it is. Love the Lord your God with all your and love your as yourself. And they're like, what the heck did he just say? we have nothing. We can't even, what do we do with that? He just took 10 commandments and shrunk them down into these two things. He said, love God. Love God passionately. He said, with all your heart. Let me just say this. Your heart represents your affection. When Jesus said all your heart, he's speaking of being exclusive to him. That your heart, where your affection comes from, exclusively worships Jesus. Love God with all your heart, with all your affection. And then he says, love God with all your soul. Your soul speaks of your identity. Your soul is who you are, not your body, but your soul. God wants us to love him with all our soul to the deepest level of intimacy, holding nothing back. And then he says, love God intelligently with all your mind. I don't think God ever wants to force anyone into following him. He wants you to think about it. He wants you to weigh it out. He wants you to consider all the options before you make a decision to follow him. And when you have to think about it, you know, to worship him intellectually, that's kind of the balance, isn't it? Because your emotions can get out of control really fast, but your intellect is what keeps you balanced. Jesus doesn't want you to get weird. He doesn't want you to go to extremes. He wants you to worship him in truth, in spirit. I think what Jesus was saying was this: don't respond to God's wholehearted love in a half-hearted way. We are to love him with all of our heart and all of our soul and all of our mind. And until you love God as you should, you will never have the capacity to love other people the way you should. The knowledge that I am a recipient of the love of God, the natural outflow of that knowledge is to love people. If I don't feel loved by God, how can I love you? But with that knowledge of, man, God loves me so much that he gave his only son, and that I'm a sinner saved by grace, that nothing I could have ever done could have earned it, but it's by grace that I'm saved through faith in Christ. When I get that, then I don't look at someone else and judge them where they're at, but for the grace of God, there go I. But you start to look at people the way Jesus would. Sometimes you have to look past what you see. Look past the fruit and look at the root. Look at 1 John. I'm going to be wrapping up here in just a second. I got another story to tell you. Those who are loved by God, let his love continually pour from you to one another, because God is love. Everyone who loves is fathered by God and experiences an intimate knowledge of him. The one who doesn't love has yet to know God, for God is love. The light of God's love shined within us, when he sent his matchless Son into the world so that we might live through him. This is love. He loved us long before we loved him. It was his love, not ours. He proved it by sending his Son to be the pleasing sacrificial offering to take away our sins. Delightfully loved ones. Just turn to someone and say, you're delightful. There you go. If he loved us with such tremendous love, then loving one another should be our way of life. Love God, then love people. Now, I'm not the sharpest tool in the toolbox, and sometimes it takes me a while to learn things. I'm ashamed to say. And so I was pastoring in Hackensack about 2 years after the snowstorm event. I'm working back in a plumbing store in Newark, New Jersey. Can it get any better than that, right? And I'm angry every morning driving to work because I'm working my tail off. I'm back. I felt like my life did a full circle. I started in a plumbing store. I did ministry for 10 years, and now I'm back in a plumbing store doing full-time plumbing. And I am angry every morning driving to work. The conversations that I would have with God was something like, I don't get it. Everyone else I hear about, they step out in faith, and someone writes them a check for $1.5 million to buy a building and a boat and a bus and whatever else. And I'm working for every dollar. And I'm tired. You called me to pastor, and I have to do this. This is the way every morning driving into work. One particular morning in April, I'm driving down the Garden State Parkway, exit 148, Bloomfield exit. See, when you live in the Northeast, you measure things by the exits. LIE. What? You ever have someone, where do you live on the island? What exit? What, do you think I live on the off-ramp? Like, what is that? Like, yeah, when the off-ramp makes a turn, just pull right into the driveway, right there, right into the garage. I'm driving down there, and I'm having it out once again, and I feel like God just had enough of me, and it just came to my mind, like, you're not working in plumbing because you need the money, because I could provide that. You're working because I need someone to pastor those guys. And I got so convicted. And within about 10 minutes, man, I had a whole new attitude. So I pull in front of the plumbing company, and I walk in, and I'm kind of feeling like, okay, God, I get it. So we had a guy by the name of Max, and Max grew up Jewish but didn't really practice anything, and Max was the most cantankerous, obnoxious, and fill in like the next 5 spaces. There was Max. He was so bad that when he was in he owned a plumbing company, and he never had any clients because he ran them all off. He would come into our plumbing store and mock customers and get them mad, and they'd walk out. They'd go to Home Depot. We're like, dude. So we made a decision a year before that, and we banned Max from the property for life. How bad do you have to be banned from a plumbing company in Newark, New Jersey? You are not allowed on the premises, Max. I walk into the plumbing store that morning, and who's standing there but Max? And I'm like, this is going to be a great day, I can tell right now. So I came in, I walked around behind the counter, I put my stuff down. The boss, who was a born-again believer, was next to me, and he didn't like Max either. And we were there, and Max, we're like, what's up, Max? You're kind of short with him, getting ready for a confrontation. And Max starts to cry. And we're looking at each other like, I don't know what's going on. So when he finally pulls it together, he tells us that he just been diagnosed with a tumor behind his eyes in his brain, and that they said that they could go in through his nose, I guess, and take the tumor out, but it was extremely risky. He could die, and then they wasn't even guaranteed they could get it all. Basically, he had a death sentence. Whether it was going to be sooner or later, it was a death sentence. And he was sharing that with us. We hadn't seen him in a year. And my boss leaned over the counter and goes, Max, if you don't ask Jesus in your heart, you're going to hell, dude. And I'm looking at him like, what? And Max goes, I know. And I'm like, what is going on right now? And my boss, Al, goes, would you like to ask Jesus? This is the way he talked all the time. No microphone. He'd invade your private space and talk like that. He'd go, you want to go back and pray for Jesus to come into your heart? Yeah. So we were like, we didn't want to do it where customers were coming in, because how awful would that be? And so we had this room in the back that was called the faucet room. That's where we kept all the kitchen faucets and the bathroom faucets and all that, stacked to the ceiling. We take him in this room. Max gives his life to Jesus, and he's sobbing. And then Al looks over at him and goes, dude, this is the faucet room. Out of your heart will come rivers of living water. He's like, this is so cool. And I'm like, I had just had it out with God 15 minutes before this. My mind was blown. So we get done. Max left. And me and the boss start talking, and we're like, oh, we got a problem, man. This dude needs to be discipled, but I would not recommend any church for him, including my own. He was like, would he come to your church? I'm like, I'm not going to make eye contact with you. What do we do? This guy needs to learn. What are we going to do? And I said, listen, man, why don't we just disciple him? Why don't we start meeting once a week, and we'll have a Bible study. We'll just disciple Max. So on Good Friday at 6 a.m. of 1998, we started our first plumbers Bible study. We had a dozen notorious sinners coming out for that Bible study every Friday morning. That thing went on for 4 years until I moved here. And it went on for another year, and then they ended up quitting it. But then the company I worked for had another plumbing supply in Caldwell, New Jersey, which was about 20 minutes away. And they called up, and they were all ticked off. And they're like, what is the deal? You doing Bible studies there on Friday? You can't do a Wednesday morning for us? I had an hour drive. So Wednesday and Friday, I would go to a different plumbing store and do a plumber's Bible study with these ragtag group of guys. When I think back of my 7 years as a pastor in New Jersey, and I loved the church. I'd give my life for it. I loved it. But you know the first thing I think about when I think at those times? Those plumbers and those HVAC guys and the firemen and the cops and all the homeless guys that would come. That's what I think about. Because those are the ones who live outside the walls. What does it mean to love your neighbor, really? To love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that means that you love your neighbor just like you would do for your neighbor what you would do for yourself. So if you have a need yourself, you try to meet that need. If you have a hurt, you try to fix the hurt. If you have responsibility, you try to fulfill that responsibility. You know, if you have an itch, you try to scratch the itch. Whatever you do for yourself, Jesus is saying that's how you love others. We don't have to be taught to love ourselves. We got that down pretty good. Loving ourselves is easy, but the challenge is not self-love, but being selfish. And so Jesus, I believe, taught a new way to do ministry by hanging out at Matthew's dinner party. If our worship team could come out, and I just want to fast forward to 3 weeks ago. See, if you're a pastor here today, number one, I want you to know, people, that your pastor and myself, and we're all friends, and we talk. So don't give your pastor a hard time. We'll find out about it. We'll get you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But we're all friends. But let me just say this, pastors, as my friends, I think we should be the best soul winners in our churches. You know why? Because you have influence. And you know what? It's so easy to get caught in our offices from 9 to 5. I want to challenge you, man. Get your calendar out and say Wednesdays from 12 to 4, I'm going to be outside of the office meeting my congressman or meeting the police chief or meeting the business owner or whatever the case is. Because to me, that's ministry like Jesus did. We need the church and we need the ministries in the church to be healthy because we need to have a place to bring them to, right? But it's so easy to get so caught up with what's going on inside these walls. It can be exhausting. People complain about the color of the carpet and the lights and everything else. It's just crazy. The reality is outside, no one cares about that stuff. They're looking for answers because they're dying. I'll be done in about an hour, so 3 weeks ago, well, let me back up. So I do an early morning prayer here at the church, a couple mornings a week. I just open it up. Whoever comes. They come and go. Honestly, there's some mornings I don't even care if I like it by myself because I can walk around in here and pray over the chairs. But a lot of times people come. It's just great. So I get here at 6 a.m. and open up the doors, which means I stop at 7-Eleven at 5:45 and get my coffee every morning. My routine. And there's always guys in the trades that are getting their coffee before they go to work. And so I'm the kind of pastor that I love to fly under the radar. I don't even tell people what I do. I'd like to just come in and just make a friend, you know. Once they hear you're a pastor, it's over. And so there's the same guys that are there every morning. So 3 Sundays ago, my wife and I stop in before church service to get coffee, and this guy comes up to me, and he says, "Yo, what is there about you?" I'm thinking, are we going to have a fight here or what? Like, I'm going to get punched or what? He goes, "What is there about you?" And then he started grinning. I goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "I don't know what it is, man. But every time I see you, you always come in all happy and, you know, jovial. It's like 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm just grunting. I'm not even speaking English at that time. And so I'm not going to give it to him just yet. I want to make him work for it." So I'm like, "What do you mean?" I said, "I'm a morning person." He goes, No. It's more than that. What is it?" And my wife's like, "Yeah, he's a morning person. We all hate him." So we're talking, and he goes, "What is it, man, really?" And I said, "Well, Frank," he told me his name. I said, "What do you do?" And he told me what he did. And he goes, "What do you do?" Here we go. I was, "Well, I pastor a church called The Harbor." The Harbor. We drive past that all the time. And I'm like, yeah, that's it. He goes, "Now I know why you." I said, "No, that has nothing to do with it, man." And so we just had this conversation, and I just said, "Listen, man, you should come by one time. Just come by. Bring your family. Just come by. You live right around the corner. Just come by." I'll do it. You know, everyone says they'll do it, and they never do it. The next week, one of our hosts came and got me and said, "There's this guy that says he talked to you at 7-Eleven, and he's here with his wife." So I went out into the lobby, and when we made eye contact, he started to weep. And he kept saying, "This is the guy. This guy, man. This guy." And I'm like, "It's not the guy. It's not that." You know, I'm trying to tell him, like, "It's not me, man." He's like, "You're the guy," you know. And he says to me, he grabs my arm and he goes, "My life cannot get any lower than it is right now. I've got a son with addiction issues. There's a lot going on in my family, and my life couldn't get any worse. And then I saw you getting coffee, and you invited me here, and we're here." And he sobbed the whole time. We brought him in. He sobbed through the service. When he was leaving, he sobbed. He hugged me, kissed me on the cheek in a purely heterosexual way. And he said, "I love you, man." And I'm like, "I love you too, man." It was like this man moment that was awesome. I didn't go into 7-Eleven to preach a sermon. I didn't go in to, give them the Romans road to salvation. I didn't do any of that. I just went in to get coffee. I can't even think about more than that. But I want you to be aware of something, that the Spirit of God lives in you. And wherever you go, technically, you should be able to change the atmosphere of that place because of who you bring with you. And God can take a good morning with an anointing on it and transform someone's life. They've been here every week since. We all have our places we go to. And it's easy to look past the person that's handing us our change. It's easy to be so caught up in what's going on that you ignore them. But I want to tell you something. Take a moment and look them in the eye. And say something to them to encourage them. It might just be good morning. We need to start thinking like Jesus did outside the walls. Let's throw some Matthew parties. Let's go. Everyone's going to be at 7-Eleven on Tuesday morning at 5:45 a.m. Good morning, everybody. You might see the same people in line. Buy their coffee. Spend $10, you cheapskate. Spend $10. Buy them their coffee. Blow their mind. I don't know about you, man, but I am so honored that God has called you and I here for such a time as this, because there are people that are hanging on the edge of heaven and hell, and we are the spiritual link in the chain. And everyone in here is a minister. Go outside these walls and change someone's life.